Hey guys, Stephanie here and welcome to the Aeroponic Tower channel. It's blazing hot out, super sunny, not a great time to record, but we've got huge rainstorms coming in. We're supposed to have rain for the next 4 days, so I need to get the tomatoes off the towers and harvest quite a few things. So I thought I would take you guys along what I'm doing on this channel, and every video you guys see me make, I'm just documenting real life with the tower. So I didn't want to miss this opportunity to document a huge harvest, and we're getting close to the end of the tomato season. There's lots of disease on the plants you'll see, but they're still ripening and we have so much abundance, and I want to make sure we don't lose any of that with these rainstorms coming. And I made a little mistake earlier. We're going to the river to have dinner with friends. We like to cook out by the river, and I took a lot of hot peppers and I'm stuffing them to cook on the grill over there, and now my face is on fire because I guess I rubbed my nose and my mouth and everything's burning, and it's hot out, so my flesh is burning, but that's all right. We're gonna harvest an amazing harvest and it'll all be worth it. So let's harvest some tomatoes. This tower only has 2 tomato plants on it, and I like to use this basket because it's flat. We don't want to put our tomatoes on top of each other if we can help it, because they can break apart and get smushed. Left my hori knife out. It's on fire. Look how gorgeous. Love yellow tomatoes.
Wait, gotta be wait. Go. Out.
That's fine. Alright, it looks like that's it for this tower. There's still lots of tomatoes. Anything that's blushing, I'm going to go ahead and harvest. And I harvested a few green tomatoes. I want to do some fried green tomatoes tomorrow for dinner. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those. And we're going to go ahead and take some eggplant off this tower. And anything else I see that needs to be harvested. We've got some green beans, some basil trying to go to flower. Gorgeous. And I'm also making some grilled eggplant on our dinner tonight, and I want to do like an herbed feta crumble over the top. So I'm going to harvest some rosemary. And the reason my tank is open is because I added water but not nutrients, and that's how I remember. And these are all kind of dirty right now. I just did a video on how to clean your towers. These will all be getting a nice cleanup soon. We just need to kind of get past this tomato harvest season before I invest in cleaning these, because once the tomatoes are done, that's when I need to give these a good scrub and make sure I get all those tomato roots out of the towers. We have more basil trying to flower. We're going to take that. Came out yesterday and did a huge green bean harvest. We shouldn't have too many green beans, but I'm going to take some of this rosemary. All right, I think that's it for this tower. Let's head over to another tower. And this time of year, when we're coming to the end of all the harvest, it's when I start to really evaluate what went really well for the year, what I enjoyed growing and what we ate a lot of, and then where there were some gaps and some things that I want to do better next year. And one of the things I realized this year, I grew a lot of tomatoes. I grew a wide variety of tomatoes, and I will link below a video on which tomatoes I chose. I chose to grow dwarf tomato varieties just to make them easier to manage, and I'm really glad I did all of that. But we ended up with too many tomatoes, and I like to keep my workload really simple with the gardening and being able to grow the majority of our own food without a lot of hard labor. That's one of my goals: simple, sustainable solutions for growing food in any space. And it was a lot of work to kind of stay on top of these tomatoes as far as harvesting. We ended up having to preserve quite a bit of them, which I don't love to do a lot of preservation that way, or I just wasn't prepared in my schedule for that for this year. I'm not saying I'm never going to do that. Actually, I would love to make all our own salsa and red sauce next year and be a little bit more strategic on the type of tomatoes I grow specifically for that purpose. But that wasn't my goal this year, so I did have more abundance than I cared for because of the work that was involved in it with tomatoes. And I had some gaps and things that I really wish I had more of or had grown altogether, like okra and melons, watermelons, cantaloupes, and winter squash. I didn't grow any pumpkins or acorn squash, butternut squash, and next year those things will definitely be a priority because I love those foods to eat. I love to decorate our home in the fall. Now that we're moving into the fall season, I love to have those to decorate our home with and also be able to eat them as we desire. And I just didn't get to those, and then things are weird with watermelons this year at the store, and so I definitely want to start growing all our own watermelon in the future. And I'll make a video on how to interval plant when you have mature plants like this coming to the end of their life soon. But it does get a little bit tricky as the towers kind of get overwhelmed with mature plants, but you're still trying to grow young plants so that we have food in the fall and throughout the winter. It can get a little bit tricky. So I will make a video, but basically as these plants are past their prime, I'm taking them out and I am replacing them with young plants and just moving forward without cleaning the towers. And then now at this point, since recording this video, a lot of the towers have been emptied of some of these mature messy plants, and I am able to then go clean them even when they have plants still in them. So I will show you guys how I make that happen.
These are a frog eggplant, and I don't think I'm going to grow these again. The plants produced about 10 of these little eggplant, and although they're super cute, great in Thai recipes, the patio baby just produces so much more food that I don't think it's worth it to grow this one. Taste-wise, I don't really care. There's no difference in taste to me. So I think next year I'm just going to stick with the patio baby, but they are cute. It's called a frog eggplant.
And there were quite a few things on my
These are the
towers
peppers I'm stuffing tonight
that
with some
I
jalapeno
grew
peppers.
that I won't be growing again in the future, and mainly because they don't produce a lot of food that we consume, and I hate to take up space in the towers for things that don't really replace the grocery store. That is the goal. It's to replace the grocery store, to grow an enormous amount of tangible foods. I can grow medicinal herbs and pretty things in my permaculture style gardens that you see in the background there. So I like to save the towers for all the important food items. So things like nasturtium, I thought I would enjoy having those on the towers. The flowers are edible. The leaves are edible. I don't actually like the leaves, but I can grow those in my gardens in the ground. And so I felt like they took up a lot of space where I could have been growing a pumpkin or a squash for winter storage. And I also grew bloody sorrel, And that just isn't a very
All right, I think that's it
abundant
on this
plant to
tower.
consume. You don't want to consume a lot of it because it has oxalates in it. So it's more of a garnish type food. So I can't take huge handfuls and juice it. So I decided to pull those out of the towers. I actually took them out of the tower and planted them right into my gardens because they are a perennial where we are. And some other things.
And these are the patio baby. These are what we're gonna grill tonight and what I'll be growing more of next year instead of that frog. They are just so prolific. And they keep producing.
And some other plants were marigolds. I found those to be very root heavy and unnecessary to grow on the tower. I grew a couple of dwarf sunflowers. I won't be doing that again. So just pretty much I am only growing grocery store type foods, foods that feed us on the towers. And if it's an herb, it's only ones that I don't care to grow in the gardens, in the soil gardens, because it's more difficult, or I can't. Lavender doesn't do well in my soil gardens, but it's doing great on the towers. Dill tends to be complicated in my soil gardens and gives me a hard time and gets infested with pests. It grows
Check
amazing
this
on the
beauty
tower
out.
gardens. So things like that. Rosemary, I
Trombonsino
don't have any luck
squash.
growing rosemary in my in-ground gardens, but it grows amazing on the towers. So those types of herbs I'm still growing on the towers. Stinging nettle is another one that we've found really useful this year. I have a ton I'm able to dry, and it keeps me from having to go wild forage it. And also keeps me able to harvest it throughout the year since it is a seasonal crop in the wild.
All right, I'm also going to be stuffing these jalapenos, and what I do is cut them open and I stuff them with Boursin cheese and a little Parmesan cheese on the top to create a crust. That's the vegetarian version. For the vegan version, I stuff them with a vegan cream cheese that I'm going to mix with a bunch of herbs that I'm going to harvest. And we're doing good so far. The basil's getting wilty. The basil's getting wilty super fast, so I'm gonna try and keep it in the shade. I'm gonna head over here, harvest some parsley, oregano, thyme, and then let's finish up with these tomatoes before we have a heat stroke. All right, I just went and grabbed some thyme, lemon balm, oregano, basil, dill, and I touched some stinging nettle. So now my face is stinging from hot peppers and my hands are stinging from stinging nettle, but we have our herbs. This will get mixed in with the feta to go on top of the grilled eggplant, and then I'll mix some in with my vegan cream cheese to stuff the vegan version of our hot peppers. All right, and this is the last tower we're gonna harvest from because it is so hot. And I did go look and everything else will be fine. So we're gonna just trim this up. And this is an orange Roma tomato that I've been really, really pleased with. These little green ones I'm going to add to my fried green tomatoes. I will batter those in my sourdough discard and lightly fry them. So good. You just cut them into a couple of slices, almost like a French fry. You cut them into 4 long wedges. These I'll take to our party tonight for snacking. These I mentioned in my tomato video. I don't remember the name, but they are so good. Very,
And I'll
very
still be
prolific. I've
growing
eaten off of
tomatoes
these. We've just been
year
eating
round.
a ton of those.
I'm just going to be growing some micro dwarfs throughout the fall and the winter.
So cool.
And a micro dwarf is different from a dwarf in that a dwarf can be 2 feet to 4 feet. They lean in the upper like 3 to 4 foot range, where a micro dwarf is going to be 2 feet at a max. And then some of them are super micro dwarfs. And I don't actually love a lot of those varieties because a lot of times what will happen is they're breeding the plant for size at the cost of the texture of the tomato and the taste. And so I found
Hey, they're not
11 different
terrible. They're
varieties that I really like
mind-blowingly
that
good.
grow in abundance
They're just kind of
as
a unique
micro
shape
dwarfs,
to
but
use
still
because
have
they're so
amazing taste
small.
and texture. So I will share that in another video as those progress along.
Right, we just have tons.
But what's great is that even though we're coming to an end here,
Tomatoes
I don't have
hiding
to
in here.
stress that we're not going to have tomatoes and I'm going to have to rely on the grocery store if we want that type of food. I will still have an abundance of tomatoes all the way until next spring when we can plant these outside again. It'll just look a little bit different. There'll be more cherry tomatoes and snacking tomatoes, but you can still take any tomato and make sauce with it. So I'll be
They're
able to
great
use
sauce
those for
tomato.
whatever we need.
And I'm running out of room in my basket. And on these hot days, this is when you want to harvest tomatoes. It's when they'll taste the best. But it does make for a very warm.
And I will
day.
link an article below in the description of this video, but there was an independent group that ran a study trying to test if there were forever chemicals on kale, the PFAS, I believe it's called, chemicals. And they were expecting to find trace amounts on the kale just because it's in our waterways now. It's in our water systems, which are watering the produce. But they were really shocked at the levels of this forever chemical that were found on the kale samples, and not only on the kale samples, but on organic kale at really high levels. And the thought is that it's on the organic kale possibly for a couple of different reasons. One, the water being used, if the people growing, and they didn't have the facts to verify this, but these are sort of the theories behind why these forever chemicals would be on organic kale. But if they're using biosludge, which is wastewater waste to water the plants, it's called biosludge. It can have a lot of pharmaceuticals and chemicals in it. The other theory is the plastic containers have the forever chemicals on them, and these produce items are being wrapped in plastic. Now I even see like zucchini and cucumbers are individually wrapped in these like sealed plastic, or they're almost heat wrapped. It looks like it's heat wrapped over the vegetable to keep it fresh. So it's believed that just whatever container the kale was in could have had the forever chemicals on it if it was a plastic container. And then the other theory is that when you're organic gardening and you're relying on growing without pesticides and herbicides, a lot of these growers use solar tarps and plastics in order to keep weeds down and protect their crop from pests. And so they're wondering if maybe some of these tarps and these ground covers are leaching these forever chemicals right into or on top of the plants or into the soil near the plants, causing the issue. But regardless, if there ever was a time to start growing some of your own food, I believe that's now, whether it's with tower gardens. I do some raised bed gardening that I'll show on this channel at some point. And some of the permaculture gardens that I do, I'll make some videos on those too. But whatever you can do to grow some of your own food can really reduce the amount of toxins you're exposed to, and can really bring a lot more nutrition into your life because the food is so fresh and we get to eat it right out of the ground or right off of a tower, which just brings that much more nutrients into our bodies.
Forget the green beans. Whew. All right, here is our harvest. We have eggplants and peppers, some extra tomatoes, lots of herbs, lots of basil, and peppers. Did I say peppers? Green beans. And then this giant basket of tomatoes. So many tomatoes. Whew. All right, and what I'm gonna do is take all of the ripe ones and go ahead and put them in a paper bag, and they will immediately be frozen. I also am gonna let my peppers sit out here on this bench. I leave them out here to dry. I like to use dried peppers throughout the winter. This is one of my favorite ways to store peppers. Then I can just toss them into soups and recipes as we need them. But I like to make a little X shape on the bottom of my tomatoes before I freeze them, and that just makes them easier to peel. Once they thaw, you can slide the skins right off. So we're gonna go through. This is gonna store up the freshness of these as well, because they're going right from the vine to the freezer within, what, like 15 minutes here. I will pull these out for, I like to make dal, I like to make Thai recipes, and the kids like red sauce and spaghetti. So we just pull out the tomatoes for whatever recipe we need. And what an abundance we have had with the towers this year. So much food has come off of these towers, and that is my goal here, to help people who want to technically homestead, is what I would call it, with the towers. Working towards growing the majority of your own food. You can do some growing with one tower, and then depending on, you know, how much of your own food you want to grow, that'll depend, and how many people in your family and what you eat will depend on how many towers you need. But that's my goal here, is to help people find creative ways to max these towers out, because it's a great way to grow food. It works. This one has a dead leaf on it. It works. Well, and I guess technically I could have washed these first, but whatever. Not a huge washing off the towers person, just because they stay so clean, and I don't know, I just don't worry about it. They're not exposed to where like animals go to the bathroom or anything that would be harmful, but actually that's where B12 comes from. We didn't have to, vegetarians didn't have to supplement with B12 originally, because the food came out of the ground, and the B12 comes from the animals, and it would get on the food, and that's where you get the B12 from. You don't actually get the B12 from the eating meat because it's in the meat. You get it because it's a bacteria on the animal, and the bacteria is in the meat because of the animal. So what I was saying was, I try to stretch the limit on these, figure out how to grow the maximum amount of food possible. That's a good one for slicing for dinner tonight, and share that with you guys. So if you want to grow your own food, replace the grocery store, then you have the tools to do it. Thanks for joining me. I will see you guys on the next video.